Hi, welcome to part 5 of our skeet shooting tutorials. This one we're going to be focusing on keeping score and by necessity how to store health on our targets. Now just as a review, let's go ahead and look at creating a UI for the score. I'm just going to create a UI text. Some things that I'm still seeing people get not quite right is make sure, really sure, that you're anchoring both the pivot and the position. So let's say that I want the score on the top left. I'm holding down both the Shift and the Alt to put this in the top left corner, okay, so that it will always be in that top left corner. Now second, I'm making sure that this canvas is not using a constant pixel size, but instead I'm scaling with the screen size. I'm going to scale this with a 1920 by 1080 screen size because that's probably what most people will be playing this as. Now, I'm going to take a look at this font as well. Some of the things that we're still having problems with as well is people with really bad quality text. So remember that what you've got to do is, in order to make that text look good sometimes, is what you need to do is use the rect tool, go ahead and make that a little bit bigger, and then change that font size to a much bigger font size. That's the way that you're going to get that text to look crisp. Now, if you need to, after you've kind of got that that font size at that like you want, you can scale it down if you want. But we don't want to have font at like 14. Because if it is at 14, it's just never going to look good. So let's say I reduce that to 0.25, 0.25, and 0.25, then you can still see that that's nice and crisp because the text is 222. The font size is 222 or whatever. That's an arbitrary size. Okay, so this I'm going to call score label. I'm going to be, to make sure this works out, this is going to be applied aligned left, and I'm going to call this score. Then I'll just take this, I'm going to duplicate that and slide that one over here. This will be my score value. So we'll list that as 0, and this will be my score value. All right, later I'm going to come and talk to those, but for now I just want to make sure that that's there. Maybe I'll take these and let's change the font color. I could even download some other fonts, but I'm just going to go with white there so that we can see that a little bit easier. And maybe I'll go, let's go a 0.5 on these just to make sure that score is easily seen for our demo here. Okay, so our score is in place here. Now we need to start making sure that we have a way to talk to it. Now we already have created, as part of our tutorial so far, our scripts. We have a script called Pigeon. Now this Pigeon script, all it's really doing is keeping track of a value called speed right now. That's the only one we're talking about. But of course it's also going to have a health value and a point value to it. Now we're going to work with our standard do damage functionality that we've talked about before. It is going to be important that this has an argument for sent value. The idea here is that as we shoot, say something like the pistol, we're not going to do a ton of damage, but if we hit one of these targets with a rocket, it should pretty much wipe this out. So pretty standard stuff here. Health is equal to whatever health was minus the sent value. And then what we'll do is, just because we already know how to do this and we can pound through this, let's make sure that this script knows who the that it actually destroys itself when it's destroyed. So let's do let's check to see if health is less than or equal to 0. And if it is, then what we'll do is we're going to instantiate an explosion at wherever this thing is at, transform.position, and here we'll just use transform.rotation. We could also use quaternion quaternion.identity if we wanted to. Now it doesn't know explosion, so let's make sure that we create a public game object here called explosion that we'll need to populate out there. So anytime it gets hit, then it will go ahead and instantiate the explosion, and of course we also want it to destroy whatever game object this script is attached to. All right, now this is going to be great when we're actually destroying things. The problem is we need this to also change the score. So let's look at how we would build this. We've already looked at this idea of having a scorekeeper. So let's build this just real quick. We won't go through all the details of this because you already know the how this works. But let's create one that's called Scorekeeper. I'm going to make a game object in the scene. It's going to be called Scorekeeper. Let's change Scorekeeper to Scorekeeper script. All right. I'll need to come in since I've relabeled this, renamed the script. I need to make sure that I change the name of the class. Scorekeeper script. All right. Now let's come back, and just so that we don't get lost in this, I'm going to make sure and get my Scorekeeper script assigned to my Scorekeeper. It doesn't have to be a 000. I just find it easier to keep track of all those empty game objects. Okay, so the Scorekeeper is going to keep track of a couple things. We're going to let's just make it public now so we can see it. Public integer that we're going to call score, and then later there will be a public integer that we'll call high score, although I'll leave that up to you to create. I'll make a public method called change score. And it will have an incoming argument of sent score, or here we'll call sent value. So this should look an awful lot like the health script. We're just going to say score is equal to whatever score was plus sent value. And then every time we change the score, we want to make sure that we also change it in the UI as well. I gotta quit typing and talking at the same time. Okay, so let's make a public game object here. Here, we'll just write straight to the text. So let's make sure we're using the Unity engine.ui library. And then let's start talking to the text that this will be our score value. So every time we change the score, then we want to take score value.text. And there we want to make sure that that is equal to whatever score is, and convert that integer to a string. All right, so back in Unity, let's tie some of this stuff up while we're at it. Okay, so this should be asking for, there's the score. It's asking for where the score value is. So I'll go ahead and drop that in so that that's set to go. Meanwhile, let's come in here. Yep, that should be fine. Let's come into the pigeon script, and before we destroy ourselves, or even before we instantiate, we need to start going back and communicating to that scorekeeper. So I'm going to do gameObject.find, and the thing I'm going to find is scorekeeper. That's the name of the game object. On that scorekeeper, I'm going to get a component that is called scorekeeper script. And on that scorekeeper script, I'm going to fire the change score, and the value I'm going to pass is going to be different depending on the type of pigeon that I've got. So what I want to do is pass the point value over to that. So I'll pass point value so that it's there. So it'll go ahead and change the score once that is actually at 0. Okay, so that should all be tied up. Let's go ahead and make sure that our scripts here are tied up as they need to be. So let's look at our animations here. So here are, oops, not animations, our meshes. So here are these, and all of these should have the that pigeon script. They're all looking for explosion that we haven't defined yet. So let's come in and real quickly grab that from the standard assets. So let's grab chicken, condor, and dragon. And all three of those will bring explosion in so that they know what they are. All right, so meanwhile, each of these has a different speed, but they should also have a point value. So let's say that I'm going to make the chicken have a point value of 25. Let's have the condor have a value of 50, and let's have the dragon be a value of 150. I don't know, we'll see. Let's make the chicken so that its health is pretty low. Let's say that its health is 50. We'll tell the condor that its health will be 75, and we'll tell the dragon that its health will be 100. All right. So we can adjust that. Maybe because the dragon is moving fastest, you want its health to be lowest. I don't know. You can kind of play with that as you go. So each of these now has a health value. If we hit them, then that health will change. So far we've got we've got two weapons. We haven't built the pigeon-seeking missile yet. We've got the RPG that we've already constructed and the pistol that should both be functioning. And then later we're going to create the pigeon-seeking missile. It becomes important though with these three weapons for us to know how they would actually be talking to the pigeon. Now remember, the pigeon has got this public method called do damage that expects to receive some information, namely the sent value. And so we need to make sure that we know who actually calls out that do damage method. Now for the PSM and the rocket launcher, these are actually going to have these objects that are flying through the air that have colliders on them that when they strike the pigeon, which also has a collider, that we'll be able to register that that collision has happened with onCollisionEnter, with the method onCollisionEnter that we've talked about in the past. However, remember that the pistol is actually using ray casting to shoot out in a single frame, so we actually don't have a projectile in those cases. Now, these two different methods, onCollisionEnter and ray casting, are important to remember, partly because the ray casting is actually built into our weapon script, but the onCollisionEnter for the rocket hasn't been built yet, or for the pigeon-seeking missile. What will happen eventually is that when onCollisionEnter is fired, then the rocket will call out to the pigeon to do damage. This will also happen in the pigeon-seeking missile because it will have its own script that onCollisionEnter, it will check if the thing that it's hit is actually the pigeon, and if it is, it will call out to its do damage. However, on the ray casting, in this case, the gun itself, or the weapon script is actually going to do the damage. So it's the thing that has to call out to the do damage. So let's look at how we might build this in. So let's start off with the ray casting, and I'm going to come in to the weapon script. And on the weapon script, I'm going to come into the area where we're talking about the pistol. So here's all the work where we're casting out, we're ray casting out, we're drawing a ray, we're starting the gun effects and all those kinds of things. Here's the idea with the bullet hole. What I want to do is to determine that if I hit the pigeon, then I want it to go and do the damage to it. Now, in order to make this work real well, I'm going to just make use of tags. So what I'll do is come here and say if thing I hit, if that collider's game object has a tag that's equal to, let's do pigeon, which we haven't created yet, then I want you to do some work. Namely, what I want you to do is go to that thing I hit, its collider and its game object, and get a component on it that is called, what did we call it? Pigeon script, okay? Called pigeon script, and on that pigeon script I want you to fire a function called do damage. And then this is going to be the pistol, so it's going to do a small amount of damage, but we do have to pass the amount of damage that it does. So let's say that it does 10 damage is how that works. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry about instantiating a bullet hole when it hits the pigeon. So what I'll do here is I'll make an else statement. And basically what I'll do is take all of this bullet hole stuff and put that in here. So if I shoot something and it's tagged as pigeon, go ahead and do damage. Otherwise, create a bullet hole decal and leave it in that spot. Now, I can't do this same kind of work right down here on the RPG, because what this does is the RPG instantiates the rocket and shoots it off. We need the rocket to actually have its own script to do this work. So I'm going to come back into the to Unity and start to create another script for our RPG rocket. So I'll create another script for RPG rocket script. In this RPG rocket script, this is the one that's actually going to be doing the damage to the pigeon. So what I'll do is on this one, as we talked about in the slides, is let's do a on collision enter. And on collision enter, we know that we're hitting something else, right? It's actually called collision. So let's check to see if collision dot, do we have to do collider? Probably collider dot game object. If its tag is equal to pigeon, then we'll go ahead and do that same thing. We'll say, hey, that thing that you just ran into, we might not have to have that other collider there, but it doesn't hurt. Let's get the component on that called pigeon script. And on that pigeon script, I want you to fire the do damage. And in this case, I want you to pass 100, right? If you get hit with a rocket, you're kind of clobbered. Now, the reason why this becomes important is that we don't want it trying to yell at, say, the floor, hey, let me see your pigeon script and do damage, because Unity will crash, or it won't crash, but the game won't work because the game will yell at you and say, hey, the floor doesn't have a pigeon script. So that's why we wanted to check to make sure that the thing has a trigger. I mean, that it has a tag called pigeon. Now, this same thing, I could probably use the same thing on the PSM, and that's probably what we'll do. But that's the basics there. All right, let's start to tie everything up. So what I'm going to do is let's come back and make sure I've got everything I need to. So here's my RPG rocket. I'm going to make sure that it has my RPG rocket script on it. That RPG rocket script is probably all that we need there. What are the other scripts that we've written? Scorekeeper script, pigeon script, weapon script, all those should be fine. All right, so I'm going to do, to test this and make sure that this works, let's go and grab our chicken, condor, and dragon. And I don't want to have to worry about whether I can hit them or not. So I'm just going to grab those three and let's just drag them right out into the scene here. Let's see, chicken, oop, not that one, condor and dragon. And it just seems unsporting to shoot them in the back. So let's rotate them around so that they're set up here. Okay, so yeah, they would actually be flying at a really fast pace, but this will allow us to see what's happening here. Okay, so let's look at the chicken here for a second. I'm looking at what its health is, its point value, and its speed. So what will happen here now is that as I start the game and I press 1, then I should be able to, oh, I don't have a reticle on there, do I? And they are going shooting out of the ground. So let's grab those really quick and slide them up a little bit so that they just hang out there as they sit. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit play here. I'm going to start with the rocket launcher because I don't have a reticle for my pistol. So let's pull that rocket launcher out. Oh, and hit it. And oh, it hit that, but because they are not tagged as pigeons, then that stuff isn't working. Okay, so let's add a tag, and this tag is going to be, I'm just going to call it pigeon. Let's come back, make sure that these are actually tagged as that. So you guys are pigeons. Let's make sure that these versions out here are tagged as pigeons. They are. So that as we play this, we hit 2. Oh, I missed. And there it went. Okay, so several things happened here that are important. Number 1, it actually exploded like it should. And number 2, as you look at that score, you can see that the score changed to 25. So let's just try real quick and see if we can hit one of these other ones just for a second. So let's hit that one. Yeah, 150. Okay, we're good. Okay, so let's do a few other things that are going to be important. Number 1, I want to make sure that when that rocket actually hits something, that it goes ahead and destroys itself. So I'm going to go ahead and let's make a public game object called explosion here, so that if this hits the floor, it also does it. Either way, no matter what we want this to do is on collision enter, when it hits something, we're going to instantiate explosion at wherever this rocket is at. Transformed dot position, and here we'll use transform dot location or rotation. And then we'll destroy this game object so that we don't have these rockets that keep kind of flying around. Okay, so let's tie all the rest of this up. So I'm going to come into the rocket, make sure that I'm looking at this, and let's go ahead and use that same explosion. Now, I don't want the explosions to actually knock these things off path, so I'm going to go ahead and select all of them and make their mass really large so they don't get knocked off path if an explosion happens near them. Okay, so let's just double check here. So with the rocket, if I fire over someplace, well, I guess I need to, yep, that blows up. If I hit the dragon, there's 150. If I hit that, then yep, that's changed the score. And that poor chicken just sitting there, then that's ready to go. So all the rest of these, right now I'm firing it like a, oh man, I got the dragon right there. Firing these pretty fast, but which we're going to change in a little bit. But this starts to get us set up so that we know that that part is working. Okay, let's see if the raycasting mechanism is working as well. To do this, I'm going to set up the reticle really quick. I'll be right back. All right, so I'm back. I just used the reticle from previous projects, dropped it into an image. Let me make sure and rename that reticle. This is just a review of what we did last time, or with the raycasting. So now this should allow me to fairly easily see how this works. So when I play it, let's make sure that my active weapon is the pistol. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then got that one. So this one will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yep, that one's working. And I can't remember what this one was. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That one takes 8 hits. Okay, so we know that both of these are working, and then if I'm not hitting, if I'm not shooting one of the pigeons, then it goes ahead and leaves a decal. Okay, so both of those are working. We know that the Scorekeeper is working. We know that the health system is working. So get up to that point on this one, and then here, let's see if... Shoot, missed it. Boy, some of those are really flying. Let's... All right, that one works. So I might choose to adjust these. Looks like the only ones I'm fast enough to hit. Boy, those are really fast, so I might adjust those in getting my settings worked out. Okay, up to this point, the next thing we're going to look at is the pigeon-seeking missile, and we'll move on from there.